Hello folks, and welcome to another ship review episode, and today's episode is going to be on the tier 10 US battleship, the Montana. I'm going to go over her stats, recommended modules, recommended captain skills, and show you a little bit of gameplay, so by the end of this video you should have a pretty good idea of what this battleship is capable of. So before I get into any of the statistics and everything about the Montana, I first actually want to talk about the ship itself, and sort of my feelings about the ship as of the moment. The Montana is a playable tier 10 battleship, but in the way the game is right now, where the opposition is either another Montana or a Yamato, and especially when up against a Yamato, I feel like the Montana really isn't up to par. So, I would almost right now like to sort of consider the Montana a sort of BB 9.5 almost, as in it will easily handle pretty much everything of a lower tier and itself, but it cannot go up against the Yamato, and I'll explain that when I go through the statistics and you'll kind of understand why. So let's go over the survivability of the ship first. In terms of HP, as a tier 10 battleship or a tier 9.5 battleship, the Montana's HP is sufficient. It is a little bit lower than the Yamato, but its HP is fine. However, where the Montana seems to struggle is when it comes to armor. On paper, the armor doesn't seem that much worse than a Yamato, but because of the way the Yamato's guns are, they almost seemingly have no problem penetrating Montanas, even while angled, while the Montana would struggle a lot trying to penetrate the Yamato. So again, like, the armor is fine against itself and everything lower, but against the Yamato, it's just not good enough, which is why I kind of think of the ship as being sort of in that middle between tier 9 and 10 tiers, rather than being a true tier 10. Now, if you look at the guns, which is supposed to be where the Montana has its strength, because it has a lot of firepower. It's got 4 triple 16-inch guns. These guns are great, again, against itself. It's good against everything below it, but again, against the Yamato, it just doesn't penetrate. Take a look at the actual statistics of the weapons. In terms of range, 23.6 kilometers is a little bit less than, again, a Yamato, but again, more than everything else, so the range is okay, but where the Montana runs into problem is actually the dispersion. In terms of rate of fire, in terms of the turret traverse, it's all fine, 2 rounds a minute, 45-second traverse time, that's all great. But look at that dispersion. At 23.6 kilometers, the Montana's dispersion is 297 meters. Take a look at what the Yamato has at 26.6 kilometers. Dispersion 276 meters. So that means the Montana is going to suffer markedly worse dispersion from its guns. Also, when it finally does actually hit anything, the actual citadel damage of the Montana and also the penetration damage is going to be lower, as the 16-inch shells only do 13,500 damage, compared to, if you look at the Yamato's 460mm guns, they do 14,800 damage, which is a lot more damage per shell. So with the main armament, the Montana pretty much no contest, and of course you also have to factor in the secondaries. The Montana's secondaries are not really that great. It's got 10 dual 127mm guns, they fire 15 rounds a minute, they do 1800 damage, and their firing range is 5 kilometers, which you never really buff anyways. However, on the Yamato, you've got secondary guns that reach out to 7 kilometers, and if you throw in the skills, the captain skills, and the modules, you can get those secondary guns out to about 10 plus kilometers, which means that if you even try to knife fight, you're going to be at a disadvantage, as the Yamato secondary guns are going to be raining down on you way before your secondary guns get into range. The one advantage the Montana does have lies in its AA. The Montana's AA is better than the Yamato. It does very, very good damage, and even the range of the AA is better. So at least in that regard, the Montana has an advantage. Although, in-game tests, especially with the tier 10 carriers, does tend to show that the AA doesn't shoot down as many planes as you would like, and so even then, it's not really that big of an advantage. Maneuverability-wise, the Montana is 1 knot faster, which really doesn't feel like much in game. Its turning circle radius is worse because it is a longer ship, and so its turning circle is likely to be bigger at 950 meters compared to a Yamato's 900 meters. In terms of the rudder shift, they're very, very similar. Concealment, the Montana is a little bit better, and it's actually this concealment stat, I think, that will make the Montana somewhat playable against Yamatos. And actually, it's the concealment, I guess, setup that really makes this battleship work. So let's take a look at the recommended modules and also the recommended captain skills and the reasons why I picked these kinds of things. In terms of modules, I would say in the first slot, get main battery modification 1. Again, anything that helps your main guns from getting knocked out is going to be a good thing. So get that first. And then in the second slot, there is something that can increase your main gun firing range. I would say don't get this because at that kind of range, your dispersion is so bad, it's not worth it. So, I mean, I can show you what it looks like actually. Let me throw on that module. Take a look. With that, the dispersion increases to 334 meters, which is kind of crazy at that kind of range to really try to hit anything. So I would definitely say don't get this. But instead, in the second slot here, get the AA guns modification 2. The AA is what makes your ship better, I guess, than the Yamato. So get it. Make your AA even more usable. In the third slot, now here's where you have a choice. You can either go for even stronger AA by getting AA guns modification 3. That's increasing your AA effectiveness by another 20%. Or you can opt for the gun fire control system modification 2. This is going to make your guns a little bit more accurate. So at 23.6 kilometers, your dispersion drops down to 276 meters. And that little bit of accuracy could really help in actual battles. The rest of it, pretty standard. Get damage control system modification 1. And then, of course, you want to make your steering turn a little bit faster, so get steering gears modification 2. That's going to be really useful. And then finally, the last one, get concealment system modification 1. And you'll see how this is going to make your ship a little bit more playable than if you offer anything else. Of course, always get the camo paint. That's going to be very, very useful for your ship because it is going to allow you to be a little bit more stealthy. So do get that. Now, when it comes to the commander, there's a lot of different setups, but I've tried pretty much all of them, and I really only find the concealment one to really work. So for your captain, here is what you are going to want to get. When you first get your first skill point, put it into situation awareness so you become aware of ships that are spotting you, namely destroyers. At tier 10, with the turning radius of the Montana, you really want to be aware if there's destroyers near you, especially things like Shimikazes and Kageros. So situational awareness first, then get expert marksman. Again, just, that's one of the better parts about the Montana, the gun traverse. So get this to help your guns traverse a little bit faster. After that, I would say get Superintendent first. You want to have those extra heals, especially up at tier 10. So get Superintendent first, then go Advanced Firing Training. Again, this was going to help your AA by increasing the range of it. Get that, and then most importantly, get Concealment Expert. That is going to cover your first 15 skill points. Afterwards, after the 15 skill points are done, you want to put the rest of your points, basically save it up for High Alert. Although before you get it, if you're willing to spend some doubloons to reset your skills, you might want to first get maybe basic firing training, then basics of survivability, and then finally when you collect the third point, you go get High Alert. So that is pretty much the setup you're going to want to have on the captain skills of the Montana. And the reason why you want to offer all this is because once you have all of those, first of all, your AA rating goes pretty much to what max will be. And for your 40mm AA guns, it can extend to 5.1 kilometers, which is a decent range for them to start engaging torpedo bombers and so on and so forth, just to be able to shoot down some of those planes. Not only that, but most importantly, the concealment, especially on the surface, drops to 13.8. This is going to allow you to fire and to sort of blink in and blink out and not always be spotted. As a Montana, if you're always spotted, especially with your rather slow rudder shift time and your large turning radius, you're rather a bit more vulnerable. So you want to be able to fire, kind of turn away, and then blink out so that people can't constantly rain down shells on you. There is also one last disparity I have to talk about between the Montana and the Yamato, and that lies with the repair party consumable. The Montana, using the repair party consumable, can recover 481 HP per second for 28 seconds, and that is like light damage and things like that. That allows the Montana to recover up to a maximum of 13,468 HP, which is approximately 14% of the Montana's total HP. If you compare this to the Yamato has a huge advantage because the Yamato is able to recover 729 HP per second, which gives the Yamato a max repair of 20,412 HP, which is exactly 21% of the Yamato's max HP. So this adds to the disparity that already exists between the Montana and the Yamato in everything else, the gun, the penetration, the dispersion, the armor, etc. This adds to it even more, making the Yamato so much more durable and just so much of a better battleship than a Montana, and pretty much the reason why I classified the Montana as a tier 9.5 battleship. Anyways, that's how I would set up the Montana, so that at least when I get into a tier 10 game, I at least have some ways of playing this ship, especially if I happen to run into Yamatos, as those are the ships that are going to cause the biggest amount of problems for you. Alright, so let's go take a look at some actual gameplay, and I'll explain some more things when I actually show it to you in game. Alright, so let's start with the good things. The things that the Montana can do well in battle, the things that it can kill. Well, it can kill cruisers pretty effectively. So take for instance this tier 10 German cruiser I run into, the Hindenburg. Now remember that stealth thing I was talking about? It allowed me to actually get close enough so that I can actually fire off a salvo and actually be deadly. So there we go, salvo out, 3 citadels, couple of target hits, and I pretty much wipe that Hindenburg's HP. Once again, remember that concealment thing I was talking about earlier? It is really, really important because that concealment is going to let you sneak up a little bit closer to some of these cruisers and really surprise them, because your shells don't take so long to travel and they won't have so much time to react. Aside from cruisers, however, the destroyers that like to get close to a Montana, the ones that happen to pop up, let's say, at 6 kilometers, well, with the number of guns that your Montana has, you could cripple them even if you're just firing AP. So that is definitely things that the Montana can do pretty damn well. Now, moving on to battleships, at least battleships of a lower tier, or what I would consider the same tier as the Montana, 9.5, meaning another Montana, the Montana does fine. So take for instance this engagement against 2 Tirpitzes, which are not that easy to citadel, and with just penetration hits alone you can still do quite substantial amounts of damage. That last salvo there, 6 hits, 16,000 damage. Furthermore, the armor on the Montana is sufficient to protect you from return fire from pretty much all guns up to 16-inch caliber. So taking return fire from a Tirpitz really doesn't do anything to my Montana, and I'm able to pretty much engage these 2 battleships with near impunity as long as I stay angled. This next salvo, I believe, is going to do even more damage if I remember correctly, as I will be able to get something like 10 hits, 27,000 damage. So you don't really even need citadel hits when dealing with lower tier battleships. The Montana does have sufficient firepower to deal with them. But again, the real problem for Montanas is when they run into Yamatos, and as a tier 10 battleship right now in World of Warships, you pretty much are going to run into Yamatos in every battle you play, because I think a lot of people have started to realize that the Yamato is just a better battleship. And so I'll show you in the next clip what happens when as a Montana you run up against the Yamato, and trust me when I say it is really, really, really frustrating. Take this clip for instance. So here we have a Montana and a Yamato. Take a look at the HP of the Montana, take a look at the HP of the Yamato. Yamato doesn't have a lot of HP compared to the Montana. Well, take a look what happens next. So Deprived Pickle is in a Montana, and there is another captain in the Yamato, and watch what's going to happen. The 2 battleships here are trying to basically citadel each other from the front magazines. Pickle is going to slowly inch his Montana out, stay as angled as possible, and basically going to come out at this roughly the same angle as the Yamato is. Eventually, Pickle's going to find a shot and he's going to take it, and pretty much nothing happens. Hit, no penetration, nothing happens. Look at the return shot from the Yamato. Multiple citadels wiping out pretty much all of Pickle's HP. A lot of times when you're in a Montana and you go up against the Yamato, the feeling is almost like the Yamato's firing real battleship shells at you. Well, the best that you seem to be able to do is fire marshmallows at the Yamato that barely even scratch the Yamato's paint. I mean, heck, if I ever run into a really angled Yamato, a lot of times I just tend to opt to fire HE because, heck, at least, you know, those marshmallows are explosive and there's a chance of burning the Yamato. But truthfully, in so many situations, the armor piercing of the Montana just doesn't seem to do anything at all. So take a look in this next clip, and again, it's Montana versus Yamato engagement. Take a look at this. I fire a full salvo, 12 16-inch shells against the Yamato. That Yamato is somewhat angled now by this time, and I'm going to put in about 6 hits into that ship. I did 3,166 damage to that Yamato. Pay attention to that Yamato, because eventually what's going to happen is I'm going to turn, I'm going to get angled, and that Yamato is going to fire back at me, and watch the amount of damage he gets when he fires. And this is a big problem because the Yamatos can fire at a Montana with basic impunity. It doesn't really have to care about whether you're angled or you're not angled, it just has to fire at you. Well, the Montana really has to maneuver into position, catch the Yamato off guard, and when the Yamato's showing a broadside, and then to try to land the perfect hits. Which means in a straight up fight between a Montana and a Yamato, the chances of you winning is really, really low. Okay, now pay attention to those shells that are coming in. That's from that other Yamato. Look at how angled I was. I took almost 10,000 damage from that Yamato. And that's pretty much the main reason why I say go full concealment when you're playing a Montana, because at least when you're super stealthy, you're able to get into positions that are tactically advantageous. So here I maneuver, I get into a spot where I finally caught a Yamato that's presenting me a nice flat broadside, and this is the time where at least I can make that Yamato pay. But take a look at what happens when the Yamato decides to turn around after this. First of all, there's 3 citadels from the first salvo, there's the 4th citadel, so I did a tremendous amount of damage there. But the Yamato is going to react, and by reacting, the Yamato is going to turn its bow into me, and the minute it does that, I am going to turn around and pretty much start running, because there's almost nothing I can do when a Yamato decides to just present a bow only. I have to now depend on my team to do as much damage through as many means as possible, whether it's torpedoes or fire. I have to really count on my team. And during this period of time, what I'm basically going to do is act as a giant shoot me target for the Yamato and, hopefully draw all of his attention to me. Now, I'm not sure if you actually paid attention to the Yamato's last salvo. That salvo hit me for nearly 10,000 damage while I was very well angled towards the Yamato. And so that just shows you how strong the guns of the Yamato are. And, now I'm just pretty much resorting to firing HE and hoping to contribute by lighting fires on the Yamato. Heck, at least when, you're firing HE, it doesn't really care about armor angling so much, and it will still do damage. So if you happen to run into a really well-angled Yamato and you happen to be in a Montana, you might just want to opt to fire high explosive, because that at least will allow you to do some damage, and hopefully the fire that you and your team put onto the Yamato will be enough to sink it. So what's the verdict? Well, I think the Montana is a very, very underwhelming tier 10 US battleship, to the point where I almost would say don't get it. Just get up to the Iowa and get a fully upgraded Iowa and stay there, as the Iowa is a very capable tier 9 battleship and doesn't always have to face tier 10 battleships such as the Yamato. So if you are working your way towards it, I would just say avoid it for now until maybe Wargaming buffs it. If you really want to play battleship, just get a Yamato instead. It is just so much better than the Montana. However, if you already have a Montana and you've been hating on it, try out the fully concealment spec Montana and see if you can at least move into strategically advantageous positions to use her firepower to, the best possible effect. Other than that, might just be better to leave her in the port and save yourself some credits. And that brings us to the end of this ship review episode. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I do apologize it took me so long to get this one uploaded. I've been working at it for a couple of days, but it's just been one pretty frustrating experience with the ship. However, if you do like what I'm doing, don't forget to like and sub. If you've got any questions about this particular ship, do leave those in the comment section below, and I'll try my absolute best to answer those. Aside from all that, have a good day, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all on the high seas.